Strong Enough merch is now available. Go to strongenoughpod.com and check out all the stuff that you can get so that you'll have those daily reminders that you are strong enough and you are worth it. Welcome to the Strong Enough podcast, where we talk about the challenges and celebrate the triumphs of people just like you. I'm your host, Claudia. Today's guest is going to share how childhood trauma led her to a career where she spent nearly 30 years, but was unhappy almost the entire time. Just a few years ago, she decided that she was worth a change, and now she helps other women make real and lasting changes in their lives. Please help me welcome Philippa Robinson. Hello, Philippa. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, it's really lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
I am so glad you're here, and it is bright and early for me right now. You have already got me giggling, which I love because it is hard to make me giggle at 7 a.m., and yet you have done it. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I would love it if you would start by telling the audience a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I'm Philippa, I'm 53, I'm in the UK. I live in Bristol this morning at 7 a.m. So when I was doing your time, I was out swimming in a lovely marine lake that fills up when the tide comes in to cool off because it's unseasonably warm here for us. I could tell you lots about my background, but I think actually that's going to come out in our chat. So shall we just let that come out? Is that okay?
I think that's totally fine. You know what? Because we make the rules here. So that's totally fine.
Okay.
I do want to point out, I love a good accent. So you are making my day so much better by being here and just talking.
Oh, well, that's nice. Thank you. Because that's really funny, because here in the UK, my accent, I grew up in the north. I now live in the southwest, but my accent sort of well, it's funny, what we're going to come on to, so I might as well say this now. When I grew up in the northwest, which is working class probably, so there was a lot of mining in the area I grew up in. Not when I grew up, but it's proper sort of mill working, hard grafting people there. And when I moved to start my legal career, my legal training, and I lived in London, I used to get people saying, "Oh, we have Northerners here now, do we?" They were this is in the 90s, really snooty, and people used to think that because I came from the north, I was perhaps a bit stupid, which was really, really interesting. It was the first time I experienced people really judging you for the way you sound, where you come from, and all that. So it's taken me a while to own my accent and be actually quite happy that I am definitely a Northerner, and I'm proud of that. So
that is so interesting to me because we have the same thing here, but for us, it's the South. So I have a Southern accent. I am from originally Virginia and North Carolina. So I have a twang that I try to control, but it's kind of, a lot of people feel the same way that you just said, is people from the South are dumb and slow and marry their cousins and all that good stuff. So I did not know that you guys had that there. That's really interesting.
We definitely have that. Definitely. I think it's changing, but it's still very definitely there. And certainly, during my formative years in my 20s and 30s, it was very definitely still there. So
wow, I really had no idea. So I've already learned something today.
I've made you laugh and you've learned something. Brilliant.
Yes. So we'll just close out now and
okay, bye.
Bye. Well, I would love to talk about you, of course, and I would love to talk about your first career as an attorney and kind of how you got there and then how we got out of there.
Yeah, it took me quite a while to get out, but I did the classic route of just doing quite well at school, going straight on to, so here we do O levels, well, we used to call them O levels when I was a long time ago. Then you go on to you study A levels, and then you know, now a lot of young people take a gap, but I went straight to university. I went to do law because I was a mathematician. I did lots of maths A levels. I loved maths. I loved the black and white about it. I liked that it was either right or wrong, which, if we go, well, we'll segue back to my childhood, I'm sure, but it really makes sense to me that I enjoyed maths because of the whole right and wrong, and there wasn't really much grey area. And I didn't want to do a maths degree. So my stepfather was a lawyer. And I wasn't trying to follow in his footsteps, but I suppose he brought the possibility of law into our home. Because my mum and my father had not been to university, but my stepfather had, and he was a lawyer. So I thought, well, I'll go and do law. I don't know what else to do. So I'll go and do law. I won't be a lawyer, but I'll go and do law. It'll be a good background. And so I, you know, trotted off to university to do my law degree. Hated it because I thought the law was black and white, but of course it's not. It's mainly grey in the middle. And there was a lot of essay writing, a lot of me having to try and form my own opinions about things, and I just didn't get it. So I really struggled with my law degree, actually. But whilst I was at university, a lot of the big London law firms used to come, this was back in the 90s, used to come to some of the bigger universities and interview people there. So by the time I left university, I had a job to go to. I had a training job to go to in London with a big London law firm. So I was like, well, I don't know what else to do. Why wouldn't I do that? So I went off and did my training in said big London law firm, where I would bump into people who would say, oh, not only do we have women here, we now have northerners as well. And yeah, heaven forbid, can it possibly get any worse? You know, we were told that very much women still were expected to wear skirts or dresses. We weren't allowed to wear trousers. But it's really funny when I tell this story now, because it seems so archaic. It was so, keep women in their place a lot. And I didn't see it like that at the time, but now looking back, but I went into the law because I felt it was steady. I felt that I would probably have a job for life if I wanted that, unless I did something wrong, obviously. It would earn me a nice income so that I could look after myself, because I didn't feel there would be anybody else there to look after me. I'd had a very chaotic childhood, full of trauma. Now I recognise it as trauma. I didn't recognise it then. And I was looking for something that was going to enable me to take care of myself. And that's how I ended up being a lawyer. I grew to dislike it quite quickly. And you know, I suppose, you know, I'm sure it's still like that now. I mean, I'm not a lawyer anymore. I finally left in 2019 after 27 years. But certainly then, you know, you were really lucky. You were made to realise you were very lucky to have a training job, because at that stage you had to do 2 years on the job training to finally qualify. So you were very lucky to get a training contract. You worked all hours God sends, and you know, you just put up with whatever kind of rubbish came your way, really. And I did not thrive there. I got through it, but I got through it by putting a mask very firmly on my face and giving a very good show of getting on with it. And I could do the work intellectually. I could do the work. I could work my way through the problems. I could do what was needed. But the actual working, the working environment, and the having to prove yourself all the time, and feeling, for me, like I couldn't take my real self to work. I mean, in fact, I didn't even really know what my real self was, but I felt like I had to play a role. It really, it was exhausting, and added more fuel to this feeling that I'd grown up with, that I didn't fit in, that I wasn't good enough, that I perhaps didn't deserve to be there. So, you know, I spent most of last year writing a book about it. So now I've sort of worked my way through all this, but I have a lot of compassion for that young Philippa now at like 22. Really just feeling like, oh God, somebody, you know, I mean, you know, somebody's going to kick me out of here unless I just put my head down and work as hard as I possibly can and try to be what everybody else needs me to be. Because that's how I'd survived in my chaotic home with an alcoholic mother, and her and my father split up when I was very young. And then she remarried, and I just never felt safe. Once she'd remarried and had more children, I always felt in the way. So it sort of pressed all my buttons. So the Philippa who went into that job, went into that career, went in with an already very frazzled nervous system and really on the edge of a trauma response all the time. And that is pretty much how I lived my life, almost totally every day, on the edge of a fight, flight or freeze trauma response until 2017, really. And at that time I was 47. So yeah, sorry, that's rather a long answer to your question, isn't it? Sorry.
No, it was a great answer, though. You gave us a lot to dig into. And what I want to start with, I think, is you said you made that change in 2017 when you were 47. First off, congrats on that. But what kept you in that cycle of wearing that mask and feeling like an imposter for nearly 30 years?
I think so. I already touched on that. I felt that it was the only way I was going to keep myself safe. I am married. I've got 2 children. I didn't meet my now husband until I was about 33. So by the time I met him, I was quite ingrained. You know, I'd had 10 years of working as a lawyer and doing all the things, and that's just the way it was. So when he met me, you know, that's the way it was. I worked long hours. I earned decent money. We could go and do things without really necessarily worrying. We didn't have a massively extravagant lifestyle, but we didn't need to worry about money. And, you know, he liked that. And when I met him, I'd had a series of disastrous relationships. I mean, now I know what I know now. You know, it makes sense that I didn't stick at a job. I couldn't stick at a relationship because I always thought that it was going to end. So I'd end it. I always thought people were going to leave me. So I'd leave. Push people away before they could leave me. I was always seeking something that was finally going to make me feel better. And I realized that the one thing that I was running away from was actually myself. So no wonder it kept turning up all over the place, and all the answers were actually inside me, if only I'd been able to understand that. So I think what kept me there was, it's what I knew. It's what I thought would keep me safe, in that I could always earn my own money. So as long as I stayed in that job, if whichever relationship I was in at the time, if it ended, I would be okay. Because I really, and that, in a way, that stopped me putting my all into relationships, but it kept me feeling safe, because that was my desperate desire all the time, to feel safe. And also, I didn't really have a calling to do anything else. So I knew I'd wanted to leave, but I really didn't know what else I was going to do. And I kind of fell into this trap, I think, of thinking that a lawyer is that's all I can do. The idea that I had skills that were transferable didn't really figure on my radar. But also, I think really there is also an element of my identity was quite tied in with being a lawyer, because I didn't feel like away from being a lawyer. Who am I? What am I? I felt like I was failing in all my romantic relationships, but actually I was a good lawyer. So it was hard to move away from something that I was actually quite good at, even though it pressed all those buttons and made me very frazzled.
What finally made you decide that you were going to take that step to get out of it and move into a place where you actually wanted to be?
Yeah, I'd like to say I had some sort of enlightenment, and that I came to, but that is not what happened. Like most people, I kind of hit a very rocky bottom. I'd been getting increasingly angry, and I would just blow up at nothing. And I knew, I was having these sort of out of body experiences where it was like I was standing to the side of me, watching me, the physical body me, be absolutely vile to my husband. Massive overreaction to whatever was going on. And I was very aware that this was getting very toxic. And my children were 9 and no, they weren't. They were 11 and 9 and 11 when in 2017. But for the few years leading up to that, obviously they've been getting a little bit older, so I wasn't caught in that fog. I had 2 children under 2 at one point, so it was really full on, and that was only within a year of getting married, because I was getting on by then, so we had to have our children if we were going to have children. So the children were getting a bit older. They were also getting to the age that I was when a lot of the chaos came into my life. So there was all these things sort of building up at the time. And then in December 2017, somebody I knew suggested I should read Codependent No More by Melody Beattie. I'd never heard of codependency, didn't know what it was, but got the book, read it, and it was like my childhood sort of written out, in front of my eyes. And it was that moment that I realized that my childhood had affected me much more than I thought it had. I'd always said, yeah, I had a bit of a crappy childhood, but that's then, this is now, I'm doing all right. And people would say, yeah, look at you, you've got a great job, you've got a nice house, you've got a husband, you've got your kids, all those things that we're that we're told should make us happy. And yet inside I was just, there was this anger and rage fizzing inside of me. And then I read that book and I was like, okay, there's something going on here. But again, I still ignored it. I didn't do anything at all. And then a month later, in January, I lost 3/5 of the sight in my right eye. Just, it felt like it was overnight. Maybe it hadn't been, but I realized there was something really strange going on. Went to my optician and he said, you need to go to the eye hospital. He said, I'm not quite sure what's going on, but go to the eye hospital. Anyway, go to the eye hospital. And they tell me that I am, or I was, but incredibly short-sighted. So I've got, bizarre shaped eyes, and all the blood vessels and everything are all stretched in the wrong direction. They're all under stress. And one of them had grown a new sort of branch, which was going into the back of my eye, leaking fluid onto the back of my retina. And I was told then that the damage was permanent. And I actually got most of it back. So it wasn't permanent, but for quite a while, I believed that it was permanent. And I also was told that they didn't know if they could stop it. And if they couldn't, I was going to lose all the sight. And there was a possibility it might happen in the other one. So I just went into a massive flat spin, like, what am I going to do now? How can I carry on the way I have lived my life, and how, who's going to want me around? Because I'd built my life about helping people and being useful, because that's what I'd done at home, and it sort of helped me survive. So I was still in that survival mode, and I just didn't know who would want me around. What was the point of me being around if I couldn't see and couldn't be helpful and useful? And I just went spiral down into a massive depression. But what I did realize was that I now had nothing to lose. And I said to my husband one day that, you know, I'm going to have to go and get some help. Otherwise, I'm going to have to leave. I'm going to have to leave the family, because I'm just going to screw the kids up. And that was the last thing I wanted to do. So I went to get therapy. I found a great therapist, and I had 3 years therapy with her, unpicked a lot of my childhood. You know, she, at the end of the first session, she just said, you know, that's not okay. You know, oh, it's funny. Every time I tell this story, a different bit like makes me emotional. She was the first person who'd said to me, that is not okay. And it was like a great weight lifted, actually, because I had felt that because I hadn't dealt with it better, that was something lacking in me, that, you know, somehow I wasn't as good as anybody else who would have dealt, you know, everybody else would have dealt with it a lot better, and somehow there was something wrong with me. So 3 years of getting down in the nitty gritty of it all, and you know, it doesn't go away. You can't, therapy doesn't make it go away, but it did help me understand. That's really helped me, understanding how what happened has brought me to where I was 5 years ago, and understanding my patterns, understanding my behavior, understanding why, well, understanding more. It's never, you know, there's always more to learn, but understanding more why I react the way I do in some situations has really helped me heal. And the last 2 or 3 years, I've learned a lot away from therapy. I've done a lot of inner child work. I've done a lot of having to work out who I am. Now I'm not bogged down by all this trauma. It's still there, but it's not, you know, it's not weighing really heavy on my shoulders anymore. And who am I? And that's been a massive sort of learning curve, you know, as I've hit 50. Yeah, that's what's happened.
I also went through some things as a child or a young adult, and it led me to a place of feeling very independent, or being very independent, and not wanting to ever rely on anybody else, because you can't trust anybody.
Absolutely.
So how tough was it for you to make that decision to say, you know what, I need help, and I am going to go get help. I'm going to ask somebody to help me, because for me, even still, sometimes it's really hard. So how was it for you?
Yeah, it was like pulling teeth. I had little bits of therapy over the years, just like 1 or 2 sessions to get me over something that was happening. But I kind of, well, I don't know whether I thought I didn't need it. I mean, I was in complete denial of how much it had affected me. I didn't understand that this broken feeling that I felt was as a result of the way I'd grown up, and that I could heal from it. I just didn't understand that. I didn't understand that I had intrinsic value in myself just by being me. You know, not helping anybody, just by being me, existing in this world, I have value. And I didn't understand that. So I hadn't sought help before. But I hadn't known that I could get help. But I think even if I had known that I could get help, I don't know whether I would have got through. And actually, you know, I think there's part of me that did know that I could get help, but I wasn't even willing to see that. But when things had got as bad as they had in January 2017, I just knew if if I was thinking I was having to leave home, leave my kids, I was kind of thinking it doesn't get much worse than this. So I've got nothing to lose. I'm going to have to go to therapy. I didn't expect it to last 3 years. In fact, I thought I'd be done after about 6 sessions. That's all I said I was going to go for, 6 sessions. Then I said I'd stay for 6 months. And then I ended up staying 3 years. It took me a while. I danced around my therapist for a long time without really stepping into the circle, you know, metaphorically. And it's still tough now, but I am much, there is a marked difference. I am much better at asking for help now. But what I'm actually much better at doing is doing things for me. You know, the best thing, the first thing I had to learn in therapy was to put myself at the top of the list rather than the bottom.
I would love for you to talk about that for a minute, because, you know, we hear now self-care has become a huge thing lately, and we have to take care of ourselves, and we have to put our own oxygen mask on before we can help others. So for somebody like you who was so into doing things for other people and showing your worth in that way, how tough was it for you to put yourself first, and what kind of changes has that made in your life and how you help others now?
Yeah, when my therapist first sort of said, so what do you do for you? Like, what do you enjoy? I was stunned, because I didn't have an answer. I mean, as you can tell, I'm quite a talker. Although therapy is very different, actually. I was much quieter in therapy. But I had no answer. I said, I genuinely don't know. I always used to say, well, if the kids are happy or my husband's happy, then I'm happy. And I really genuinely didn't know. So she encouraged me to think about some things that I could do for me. And I started off, it was probably spring, like early summertime, and there was two of my friends who were both single mums were both telling me independently, they don't know each other, but they were saying their gardens were really overgrown, and really could do with some help. And so I said, do you know what, I would love to come and spend a day with you in your garden and help you sort of really clear it out, but we can have a great chat while we're doing it, and it will, and I know that's me doing something for somebody else, but actually I was really getting something out of it. I came home and said to my husband, right, I'm going to go and help, you know, such a body at the weekend. And he went, okay. I said, I'm going to be out all day. And I was out all day, and I quite like a bit of physical work, you know, cutting things down and stripping it out, because actually what it kind of helps me sort my head out at the same time. It's like, as I'm clearing the garden, I'm sort of clearing a path through my own head in a way. And I did that a couple of times and really enjoyed it. But then coming home afterwards and thinking, oh, I've been away all day, I hope everybody's all right, and realizing that everyone was completely fine. They didn't mind that I'd been out all day. They'd all had a nice time anyway, and like the world didn't stop, and the world didn't, like, nobody didn't want me just because I hadn't been around for a day. So it was really slowly just doing things like that. And like on the Saturday just gone, we're recording this on a Monday, and Saturday just gone, I spent a day with my friend because her husband and her kids were away, but she decided she was having what she calls a permission day, and we just had a lovely day in her garden, the two of us together, and just had a really great chat, you know, because you can't have proper chats all the time when you've only got an hour, because there's so many things to talk about. And doing that now is kind of like second nature, and I don't feel like I've got to ask really, and I just go, that's what I'm doing, and it's like, yeah, okay, mum's going out for the day, and that's fine. But back then that would just not have been something that I would do. And actually that's really interesting telling you that now and remembering me on Saturday and the me 5 years ago. I mean, I look very similar. Well, I don't, because I had really, really short hair 5 years ago. This is what the pandemic's done for me. But you know, on the outside I look very similar, but inside the landscape is very different.
How does
Yeah.
that feel to just now even reflect on
Mm.
this past Saturday and 5 years ago and see the huge difference in the strides that you've made?
It feels great. It I'm always encouraging the people I work with to look, it's great that you're striving for something moving forward, but always remember to look back and see how far you've come. And I don't, I tell other people to do that, but I don't necessarily do it enough. So that was a really nice moment to just think back to that Philippa then, who felt very broken.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't feel broken now. I feel very very grounded and whole, and that fire that was inside of me the entire time, it kind of felt like it cut me in half, if this makes any sense, but that has gone, and I feel very whole, which which is good.
I
Yeah,
agree.
great feeling. Yeah.
What does it feel like to you to be able to show your kids
Mm.
a better Philippa, one who does take care of herself and loves herself?
Yeah, so that's where the ripples start. The doing, and my therapist kept saying to me, you're not just doing this work for you, you're doing it for your family, you're doing it for your friends, you're doing it for people who you don't even know are going to have the effects of this. The ripples just carry on going, and you're absolutely right. The main thing is I am much happier, so I'm much nicer to live with, and I'm not that ball of rage that is just going to fly off the handle all the time. I have much more compassion for myself, which enables me to have much more compassion for everybody else around me. And I've got 2 teenage boys, they're 14 and 15, and I do need to have quite a lot of patience and quite not take things personally, because they're not always nice and lovely. They are a lot of the time, but we all know what teenagers can be like. And actually, when I think back to me as a teenager, I was petrified of putting a foot out of, what's the saying? I'm always mixing my metaphors, but I towed the line the entire time, and I didn't give my family any angst, and I wouldn't dream of saying half the things that my children say to me. And I'm not saying it's okay, and they get told that, hang on a minute, you don't speak to me like that, but they feel safe enough to do that, knowing that this is a safe environment, and I love them come what may,
Mm-hmm.
but so I celebrate that they feel able to be like that, because they feel safe, because that's really important to me, that they feel safe. And so now I've started my own business, they can see me working hard to do this, and we talk about things a lot. One of them is doing his main exams next year, and then the other will do them the year after. They're really getting to the stage where they're going to be getting a job. It's not a million miles away that they're going to be getting a job. They're going to be going out into the big wide world, and we've got a real job to do around emotions and feelings and being able to work with them, and that's where we are. And I know I would not be able to be doing, I'm sure I could be doing better, but I know I would not be doing as well as I am now had I not done all that work. Even down to things like, my youngest was diagnosed with dyslexia only last year, because school kept telling me there's nothing wrong. Turns out he's severely dyslexic. He's just been very good at hiding it until now. But I had to really go into school and really advocate for him. And I don't think I would have been able to do that as calmly but firmly I don't think I would have been able to do that 5 years ago, because I was very, what they're going to think of me, I must be nice, no, don't rock the boat. Actually, the boat really did need rocking this time, because they were failing him. So the positive effects from it are like immeasurable, really.
You mentioned earlier that you felt like you didn't really realize how the trauma of your childhood affected you. And I feel like a lot of us experience that, and we have the same thoughts that you do of, you know what, that was years ago. I got through it. I survived. Everything's fine. But we're hearing so many more people now realize that it does intensely affect us as adults. What was it like for you to realize the effect that your childhood had and be able to tackle that head on to get better?
I won't lie, it was very overwhelming at times. And I did wonder whether I was capable of changing.
Mhm.
It kind of felt like it was really who I am, or who I was. And how am I going to be able to change this? And it takes time, it takes practice, but first of all, it takes awareness. So once I have the awareness of, I mean, a lot of mine just boils down to not being good enough, really. I mean, that's sort of trying to really oversimplify it, but generally in all situations I never felt good enough. So for instance, all my friendships, I couldn't be friends with just one person because I always felt that I wasn't enough to just be the only friend. So I would always pull somebody else in. So I always ended up in friendships of 3, always. And I then always ended up feeling left out. And I ended up pushing the other 2 away and me being left on my own. And I just thought I was really bad at choosing friends, or maybe I was not a good friend. But when the therapist helped me unpick that a little bit, I could see what was happening. And actually, at the very time she was explaining that to me, I'd just done the same thing again, brought 2 people together and now I've slowly sort of unpicked that. And I've said to one of them, actually, I'd rather see you on my own. And that's fine. And that is fine now. And that's what I do. I see this person on my own. A lot of it was working out my trauma responses. So when my childhood stuff was activated, realizing that I was in a fight, flight, or freeze response rather than in a normal response. If I was having a normal response to something, I began to learn that if I was having a big reaction to something, I don't know, say somebody dropped a glass on the floor and broke it, and I just went, oh my God, this always, all that. It was like, oh, okay. I mean, I couldn't stop it immediately, but afterwards I began to be able to go, okay, that was an overreaction. Where is that coming from? And being able to unpick these things a little bit, so that the more awareness I had, the more I noticed when I was doing it. So the more now, I wouldn't say I'm always brilliant at doing it in the moment now, but so 5 years on, it does take time. I can see it much quicker, which means I can do the repairing much quicker. But the main point is, I understand that it's not me reacting to what is going on in the moment. The reaction is coming from my childhood trauma. And also knowing the importance of repairing. So if I do that, and it's the kids that have done it, well, it doesn't matter who's done it, I will always go back and say, I'm really sorry. That was a really big reaction to what went on, and that actually wasn't about you. So that was my thing, and I am so sorry. And it's not about not doing these things, it's about understanding and making them right, because actually it's unrealistic to think that nobody's going to argue and that we're not going to necessarily overreact at times. I mean, that's perfectly normal, but it's just understanding that and making it right.
A lot of people at the age of 47 would have said, it's too late. It's too late to change. I've been in this career for 27 years. I don't know what else to do. I'm just going to stick with what I've got and manage what I have and just deal with it. So why did you decide that you were going to buck the system and make a big change, not only in your career, but also in your life for the better?
Good question. Once I had therapy, I was changed. I mean, you don't do that work and still be the same afterwards. And then I stayed in my job. So by the time all this was happening, I wasn't practicing as a lawyer anymore. I was a risk and compliance officer for a firm that had something like, they were quite small, but had about 15 offices. So they were all over the place. And I really enjoyed going out to all the offices. It was my job to make sure all the lawyers were doing things as they should be doing. So that was working with a lot of egos, a lot of older people who are quite set in their ways, and trying to sort of persuade them round. I mean, it's change management really that I was doing, but through the lens of risk and compliance. And when I'd finished therapy, I realized a lot more about why I was in the law, and also why the law had never really suited me, because it felt like they weren't really interested in the people. And I realized, going out to all these offices and trying to help people understand why they were struggling with the new systems and how could I help them embrace the new systems, I was much more interested in the people and the experience they were having at work than actually the work itself. And what I wanted to do, I put it to them that actually what I wanted to do is I wanted to be much more involved with the people, much more the safe space maybe for people to come and talk to, because not everybody has a friend or somebody at home to talk to. And sometimes actually, work is your safe space. And I wanted to be much more involved on the people side of things and really be that safe person and somebody to come and talk to and to signpost them off to places. Anyway, they weren't interested, which is really interesting, because the law firms are nothing without their lawyers. And but they weren't interested. So I was left with the decision: do I carry on doing the risk and compliance job for a man who was really he wasn't a bully, but he was very toxic. It wasn't a nice environment. He just thought it was okay to completely blow his top and everybody had to put up with it. And I just thought, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. I have spent so long putting up with this, if you don't mind me saying, shit. I am not going to do it anymore. They didn't see any need for the job that I wanted to do. So I took the decision to leave. And I worked for them for 6 months until they found somebody else, which was a mistake now, really, because it just drew it out longer and longer. And then when I finally left, they kept telling everybody, oh, well, she's still going to be doing work for us. So they wouldn't really admit I was really leaving. And then I left, and it was just end of. And I felt really rejected. I really did. So that sort of sent me into a bit of a mini spiral again when I left. And then as I was coming out of that, COVID was on the horizon. And so rather than looking for another job, I decided to follow my heart, which was always been around people. I found people fascinating. I realized I'm always interested in people's backstories, and in a way always wanted to know how they have become the person they are now. I've always been interested in that. And I've always naturally fallen into a coaching role at work, always. So I decided to start my own business as a life coach, and I haven't looked back, really. I am so glad I did it. It hasn't been easy, because I had to lose that identity of a lawyer, which was another element to me working out who I am now. And I'm not my job. There is so much more to me than whatever it is I do for a living. But I do really love helping people. And that's what I do. And I have a podcast, and I wrote a book. So I'm having a whale of a time, and I am earning the least money I have ever earned in my life, in my working life. and I'm the happiest I've ever been, which is really interesting.
What I also find interesting is that you grew up very black and white. You liked things to fit into a certain place.
I did.
People are definitely not black and white. They're very
No,
gray.
exactly.
So
There's
what is that
all...
like? Yeah. How is that to kind of shift your whole perspective?
Well, I think the need for the clarity has gone. I mean, the need for knowing where I am, so the maths and what I thought the law was going to be, was really in a direct reaction to the chaos at home. Going home from school and never knowing what I was walking back into. I think really the work I've done has allowed me to feel stable in myself, which has allowed me to then be open to this grey, but actually people are anything but grey, all it's fabulous. I love nothing better than a new client and getting to know them and getting to know their story and like where they want help and how how are we going to work together, and actually not knowing. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I haven't thought about this before, actually, but you're absolutely right. I have no idea. And I never know from one day to the next, really, what's going to happen. But that's okay now. I'm so much more laid back than I used to be. I used to very much need to control everything, because being in control helped me feel safe. In fact, I've just wrote an article about that, about my husband used to call me a control freak when we first met, but I had to work out what this control was about. And it's not because I want to control everybody, it's just I need to control my environment, because otherwise I didn't feel safe. So yeah, now I feel safe. So I can embrace all this other messy stuff, which
craziness.
Is yes. Yeah, it's brilliant.
So you wrote a book, and
I
your book is about you moving from being less than or feeling less than to being enough.
Yeah.
How was that to write?
Hard at times, because there's nobody around. My mother and my father are both not here anymore, nor are any of the other major players in it. So I was really having to, like, the early stuff, the timeline of the early stuff is quite vague, because I'm not 100% sure. But what I did really find as I wrote it, and actually a lot of it I was really there on the page. I was working things out and saying, I say things like, actually writing this now, I understand this and this. So it was very cathartic, I suppose. I did it for me, really. I've always wanted to write a book. For the last 20 years I've wanted to write a book, but I've never known. And I knew it was going to be about my story, but I didn't know how to write it. I didn't know whether I was going to fictionalize it, but that didn't sound right. And I realize now I couldn't write it until I was at least healed enough to write it. But also what I found in those pages and writing about certain things that happened, I discovered that the me now was always there. There were little moments over the years where the real Philippa sort of raised her head, and then, oh no, can't do this yet, and then had to sort of go back. But it was really lovely, actually, to see that this me now has always been there, and I just needed the right time to sort of let her out in a way. So it was tough. I hired a book coach, because actually I wouldn't have got past chapter 1 if I hadn't. So I hired a book coach, and she really held my hand through it, and she was amazing. She now is the one person in the world who knows more than me than anybody else, because there's more that's not in the book. I only really write in the book about people who are not here anymore. The members of my family who are still alive, I don't really talk about. So there's more than there's in the book, but there is enough in the book to show the journey, because the book's about me, that my journey. And the reason I published it was because I was persuaded that there was other people might find themselves or recognize themselves in my story, and realize that maybe they could unpick their story for themselves, if they wanted to. And I have had feedback from people that actually I did recognize myself in your book, and maybe I will do this or whatever. So it was tough, but it was really worth it. I'm really glad I did it.
I would love for you for a second to talk to the people who feel like they're stuck and they can't change. Their past trauma is there. They just can't get rid of it. They're in a point in their life that they don't want to be, but they don't really feel like they have anywhere else to go. What would you say to those people?
Well, first and foremost, I'd always say it's never too late to change. It's never too late to look at this stuff. It's never too late to not start again, but really have fresh eyes on the future, really, and now. And also, we only get one life, one beautiful, precious life, and who wouldn't want the maximum joy that we can get out of our life, however long we've got left, and we never know. None of us know how long we've got left. And for me, that joy in the everyday ordinary things is, so you can bring a little bit of joy into your life every single day, is really for me where the real heart of my life is now. And I don't know, I'm a dreamer. I would love that for everybody, and I don't ever think it's too late. But it does need a desire to want that, to be prepared to look at things. And you don't have to delve deep into it like I did. There are things you can start doing straight away, and there are little things that you can do for yourself. You can work on a better future by not even looking at the past, and that's what coaching is about. Certainly in the UK, that's the way we look at coaching. Coaching is much more about now, looking forward. Although for me, we always need to work out how somebody got to where they are, because then you can understand it to then move forward. Whereas counselling, therapy, that sort of stuff is much more about delving into the past. And I do believe you don't have to go back and relive all that trauma. If you can understand that there is something keeping you stuck now, you can work around that. And I mean, it's going to differ for everybody of what that thing is, but it is absolutely never too late to find someone to work with to help you through that, and have some joy.
I agree. We all need some joy in our lives.
We do.
What is one thing that a person could do today to make their life just a little bit better and bring them some joy?
Well, I always say it has to start, I'm not the only one who said it has to start with self. So actually, what do you need? Like, especially if you're feeling, I don't know, fed up, let down, unhappy, whatever it is, but what is it that you need in that moment? And I think a lot of us grow up feeling that either we can't show these emotions, it's not okay to ask for what we need, or we're expecting other people to be mind readers and understand what we need and give it to us. And that was definitely me. And because nobody gave me what I needed, I believed I wasn't worth it. So work out what it is that you need. Is it some physical, is it a hug you need? Is it a gift? Is it time? I don't know. Is it just time to yourself to do something nice? What is it that you need? And then how can you work out a way to give it to yourself? Because relying on yourself, being there for yourself, not abandoning yourself for everybody else, doing things for everybody else and never doing anything for yourself, is the quickest way to you feeling like you're not worth it. So reverse that. Do things for yourself. Even if it's just, I'm going to drink an extra glass of water today because that's going to help me feel better. So whatever it is you say you're going to do, or I'm going to cook myself a healthy meal tonight, I'm going to take myself for a walk, I'm going to go to an art exhibition that I've wanted to go to, whatever it is that you want to do it for yourself and promise it to yourself and do it. But the important thing is that you do it. So don't say you're going to do something, even if you're only saying it in your head, oh, I'm going to go and do that, and don't not do it, because that if the not doing it reinforces the, oh, you see, you're not even doing it for yourself, nobody else is going to do it.
So that is homework for everybody
Yes.
watching and listening. To
yes, do it for yourself.
Do it
something
for yourself.
Yeah.
Something fun, exciting, healthy, whatever you want, but something for you.
Whatever it is you need. Yeah.
I love it. And
Yeah.
I do notice how you brought up the water, because I am terrible at consuming water. So I hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is my nemesis.
Okay.
Philippa, we're going to take a quick turn before I let you go, and we are going to talk about some tattoos.
Yay.
I told you earlier that this is the first recording I think I have done this year in 2022 where I am wearing short sleeves because it has been really chilly. But I have tattoos. I love tattoos. I feel like they tell a story. They share pieces of our life with others. And I know that you have a couple tattoos.
I do.
I would love to hear about them.
Okay, so one I can't show you because it's on my backside.
Okay.
So that was the first one I had. It's sort of like my lower back. I had that when I was 35. I was it was 3 months before my wedding, and it's a sunflower, so it's an open sunflower, and I'd wanted a tattoo for ages and hadn't had one. Partly I didn't know where to go, partly I wasn't sure I was brave enough. And I think, thinking about it now, this is the first time, because nobody ever really asks you about your tattoo, so it's a really great question. I do think, so sunflower is my favorite flower. I love the big, bold, big head that they've got and the yellow color. I think they represent, oh God, is this right? I'm only thinking this as I'm saying it. I think they represent really like kind of the inner me in a way that I hadn't let out before. I think I was always knew there was a bolder me in there that I wasn't letting out. Anyway, so I had that done, and I think partly that was to do with getting married and feeling like, okay, I'm creating my own family now. This is I can take myself into this relationship, I hope. And actually, don't get me wrong, over the last 17 years, it's been quite rocky, but we're doing okay. So that's a sunflower. And then 3 years ago, for my 50, in the year I turned 50, and it was also the year that I left therapy. I had, you probably can't say, I had this bird. It's just a bird in flight. It's not any particular bird. It's just a bird in flight. It's turquoise and purple and blue, and it's quite, I mean, this is for me, it's not really for anybody else to see, but I had it somewhere where I can see it, because I can't see my sunflower. And this is me released out of my cage, and this is to remind me to fly free. So that's what that is about.
I love it. I have birds as well.
Yeah.
You can see a couple of them in there. Any future tattoos?
Lovely. Well, I don't know. There's always room for more, isn't there? So
yes.
I don't know. I think I'm probably working up to another one. I think I'd like one on my foot, but everyone tells me it's really painful having it on your foot.
It's a little painful, but
have you got one on your foot? Have you got
I
one
do.
on your foot? I
have one on my foot, but it was a quick one. It was maybe 15 minutes. You can do anything for 15 minutes.
Yeah, so it's not so people have told me it's quite hard. Healing on your foot is quite, no?
I did not have trouble with that. Now my friend did, but she picked at it. So she did not follow proper post-care instructions. So
okay, and they are really important. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
But
so
maybe I will have one on my foot.
I love it.
Soon.
I'm excited. Philippa, where can people find you? So if they want to grab your book, if they want to talk to you about coaching, or if they want to hear what it's like to raise 2 teenage boys in the UK, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm open for anything. Please get in touch with me. I love new people. I love meeting new people. So my website is safeandsupported.co.uk. You'll find everything about me on there, about my coaching, my book, and my podcast. My book, so my name's Philippa Robinson. It's called I See Me. That I self-published that, so it's available on Amazon and on all the territories of Amazon. And my podcast is called Meeting of Minds. And in there, I talk about therapy and my journey and what I learned along the way, because I figured if I didn't know any of it, there might be plenty of other people who didn't know about generational trauma and all sorts of fantastic things like that. So yeah, and I'd love to connect. Anybody wants to connect with me, that would be amazing.
Awesome. Philippa, you have been amazing. I truly appreciate your time today. And I know that you are going to bring so much value to so many people in this very not black and white, but gray world.
Oh, thank you. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you. And you asked me different things than I've been asked before. So it's been a real treat. And I've talked a lot, haven't I? So
I love it.
Oh, good. It's been lovely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I hope you guys enjoyed my conversation with Philippa as much as I did. I truly appreciate how she talked about the difficulties she went through in making changes in her life and putting herself first, but how important it was to do that, and now others are reaping the benefits of the ripple effect. So remember, until next week, you are strong enough, you are worth it. Thank you for listening to the Strong Enough podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform by searching Strong Enough. And on YouTube, we're on the Spear Talk channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Strong Enough Pod. If you have suggestions for an upcoming episode or a future guest, please reach out at strongenoughpod@gmail.com. Remember, you are worth it.